Hello and welcome, everyone. We are so glad that you are coming to join us today. My name is Melissa. I'm going to keep the wheels on the bus today. I already see some great chatter in the chat box on the right-hand side. So as you're joining us, we would love to know where you are from. We've got some Texas, we've got Seattle, lots of great stuff. Perfect. Hi everyone. Today is all about lessons learned in engaging students through distance learning, which I'm sure many of us have experienced, especially in the past few months. So this is a great place to be. Todd Taylor is with us today. Also, Melissa Vito is with us. So you've got two Melissas today. Before I hand over to them, I am going to give you a little bit of housekeeping notes so that we can just make sure everyone is having a good time and is on the same page. This is being recorded, so you will have access to review it at a later time. On the bottom of the screen, we have some polls for you. We would love if you would take a moment to answer those polls. There's just a little button that says polls. Many of you have already found the chat window on the right-hand side. That is for general chatter and comments. We also have a beautiful Ask a Question button at the bottom of the screen. So if you have a question throughout today's webinar, please feel free to put the question there and we will do our absolute best to get that answered for you. I'm very excited about today, so thank you guys again for coming to hang out with us today. And that is pretty much my housekeeping. So I'm going to hand this over to Todd, and he's going to get us started.
Thank you, Melissa Arnold. And thank you, everyone, for being with us today for another in the series of the Adobe Creative Campus Digital Literacy Café session. As a cafe, this is not a formal presentation. This is casual. We're drinking Red Bull. We're going to interrupt each other and tell jokes. Hopefully, they'll be good ones. And we're really eager to have you get involved, ideally through the question pod, but you can use the chat pod if that's what you're most comfortable with. My name is Todd Taylor, and I am substituting for Sebastian DeStefano, who was the director of the Creative Campus program, who couldn't be with us today. And I'm going to put in the chat pod right now really quickly a URL for those of you who maybe don't know what the Creative Campus program is. In a nutshell, what it is putting powerful digital literacy technologies in the hands of students across the curriculum to create more engaging, more creative, more higher order thinking kinds of experiences for students to help promote the learning outcomes and help students develop abilities and skills to connect their world in the classroom with their communities and with their futures in careers and professions. And so that's the Creative Campus program. My name is Todd Taylor. My business card that I no longer hand out to anyone in the days of COVID has the wonderful title of Pedagogical Evangelist. For 22 years before I joined Adobe, I was the Eliason Distinguished Professor of English at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. So I think a lot about teaching and learning and transforming those experiences for our students. And with that in mind, I'm thrilled to introduce and turn it over to our guest in the cafe today, another pedagogical evangelist, Melissa Vito.
Thank you, Todd. Thank you so much, and thank you, Melissa. I'm Melissa Vito, and just a quick bit of background. I spent about 30 years at the University of Arizona, 30 plus. Retired from there in July of 18. I had overseen student affairs, enrollment management, and in the later, probably 6 or 7 years of my career, took over building of our and visioning of our online programs, distance education, and really changed the trajectory of what I was doing. I did handily also oversee our campus emergency response team during much of that time, which, as you can imagine, came in handy this year. In July of 18, I started doing some consulting, and among the schools that I worked with was UT San Antonio, where they have an awesome team. We started working to build online programs. And as life would have it, I am now working there with this wonderful team, making sure that we get up and off the ground and keep doing really extraordinary work. So that is the quick and dirty of my story. And I would call this actually lessons learning, because this is such a dynamic period of time that along the way, we're picking up things that we're using to improve what we're doing. But this time that we're in is dynamic and continually changing. So UTSA, for those of you who don't know much about University of Texas San Antonio, it's an awesome institution, about 35,000 students. 95% of those students are actually from Texas. And so, which I now fully understand is the size of a country, but nevertheless is high number of Texas residents. Of that 5%, we have a group of international students and then some non-residents. It's a strong Hispanic serving institution, would say Hispanic thriving, history of serving Hispanic students and actually celebrating diverse cultures. And it's an emerging Research One university. And so just to give you a sense of the kind of the profile of San Antonio. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what happened in spring of 2020. I'm not going to drag everybody through all the details of it because it becomes a little bit like PTSD. And really, it's been a pretty amazing time. Talk about what our approach was and when we thought about it. And then as we've had time to kind of pause along the way, how we are changing what we're thinking about doing in terms of working in the remote and online world with our students, and also integrating tools, including Adobe Creative Cloud, and what we're learning along the way in terms of what that means for faculty and students in an online environment. And so that's kind of what I'm going to talk about. And I'm happy to, if Todd has a crazy question in the middle of it, just like jump in, raise your hand. Otherwise, I'll just kind of go through and be happy to answer some questions when we're through. So let me share my screen. Am I okay to, where's my screen share? There we go. And let me.
And so we already have one question in the question thing that we'll get to later about talking about shared platforms and also thinking about hybrid or flex models.
Yeah.
I have the great distinction of being still actually technically at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, which has been famous in its rush to get back on campus early. And so that's been quite an adventure for us. Thinking about not just high flex, but hyper flexing.
Right.
Melissa, how you doing there on the screen share?
I'm doing great. We are all shared. So
Okay.
Here we go. So you know who I am. Let me jump in and
Melissa?
yes.
I'm so sorry to interrupt. We're not seeing anything.
Okay.
No problem.
All right. That's all right. Let me go back to my screen and share. Oops.
There we go.
Am I back up?
Yes.
Okay. Now you've got it. You can see
Beautiful.
it. Okay. Perfect. We've had some technical issues the past few days, which is ironic given our conversation. So let's take us back to spring 2020. We all know what was happening during that time and how it came together. We are still in the middle of a massive pandemic. But those of us in higher education had to move quickly, which I'm sure Todd recalls from his 22 years at North Carolina is not always intuitive for higher education. But we really needed to move quickly to both sending students home, but also build our faculty buy-in and a pathway for remote learning. I mentioned that I worked in, that when I was at Arizona, I chaired our campus emergency response team. So I will say that our team started pulling together to think about this on February 24th. We all recall that day when we got together, and I oversee digital learning, video production, online learning, and teaching and learning, and kind of the whole area that puts together our remote learning. So we started thinking about this. So we were disrupted, we moved quickly, but at the bottom line, this created really for me a once in a lifetime opportunity to move quickly and to try to innovate. So, the question is, did that happen or is it happening? So in spring of 2020, we now know that 80% of higher education moved to remote learning. This is based on the new CHLO data that was released a couple weeks ago. In talking to colleagues around the country and reading people's feedback, we know the quality was varied. A lot of people put together kind of half-built remote learning courses or online to get students through the end of the semester. And there were schools that just simply said, hey, faculty, move everything you've got to Zoom. And by the way, here's a link to Zoom, and recorded lectures. And so quality was really disparate. However, we know that students made it through, and it wasn't perfect among schools. Most schools had to move about 500 courses to remote learning in the spring. Just for scale, at San Antonio, we moved about 4,100 courses. So that's definitely an average number. In the responses, most people responding said that they saw students continue to make progress. And 69% of the campuses offered specific support to faculty to help them move their modality, but not all. And everybody, 80%, of campuses are really working to improve course delivery for fall. Now, we know that course delivery for fall has been a continually shifting landscape. If you think about what campus leadership was saying in April or May, as people were more hopeful, they thought it would be more face-to-face with online as a back pocket build-in. As things have changed, it has become clear, and we now are seeing it, that most education will be delivered to students online. Even those campuses that are offering face-to-face, it's a very small proportion. I'm proud of the fact that at UTSA, we've been able to be inclusive around decision-making and make decisions relatively quickly, which has helped us in building what we're doing. So what was our approach? I mentioned February 24th, burned in my memory as the day that I brought my team together and we started planning. This was before any university directive and really before there was a whole lot of conversation about it. But at that time, we started talking about what we would do to work with faculty, how we could do that, how we could think of what our big picture goals were going to be. And we tried to anchor them in, to every extent possible, quality support for faculty using peers, along with our team from digital learning, and also trying to create an avenue for student voice. And I think that among the lessons learned is that many schools have seen that the student voice into how things were going was muted or not necessarily as clear as it is in a face-to-face environment. So focus on quality. We decided we wanted to use our learning management system as our way to deliver everything. And so we did a couple weekends of boot camps for faculty to help them get comfortable with it. And we also developed some dynamic pulse-taking ways to have students give us quick feedback. We were all worried, as many of you I'm sure were, about what would happen to our student workers when we moved online. And so in our division, we just simply said, you're going to be our frontline pulse takers. So we paid them several hours a week to simply tell us how things were going. We clearly expanded that beyond, but that became one avenue to help us understand how things were moving. So as I mentioned, we moved over 4,100 courses to remote learning in the spring. Over 1,100 faculty participated in our training sessions, and this is really astounding. UTSA has about 1,200 faculty, and literally almost every one of our faculty in some way participated in training or boot camps or webinars or individual one-on-ones, but it was really, really gratifying to see. And then we kind of thought about, everybody needs an acronym, but generally how we could think about thriving. And so we thought about training being holistic, thinking about the rapport that we wanted to exist between students and faculty, infrastructure, which we know was for all of us stretched, what our core values were, and how we think about engagement, particularly engagement between students and faculty, but engagement broadly writ. And that became a backdrop for us. We established kind of pods of expertise. And by that, I mean, we had all of the deans identify kind of a key point of contact, high level, from their colleges. And so typically it was an associate dean level person who became the rep from that academic area. And then we had over 44 faculty champions who were faculty who were already teaching online, who spanned the entire campus disciplinary area. And so every college had them. And they became they extended our capacity by working with our instructional designers, by helping us develop webinars, and by really helping become peer support to the faculty that we were working with. They were also teaching at that time, and so it was really astounding at the way that everybody pulled together to make this happen. So how did it go? Big picture, it was exhausting, but super energizing. I think that the team with which I work actually felt like they were a team for the first time ever. Could see how all the dots connected. And I would say that campus pulled together in a way that I've rarely ever seen in higher education. Everybody wanted to try to help each other to make things happen. And again, something unique in higher ed, we moved fast. I mean, we moved quickly. We did some surveying to kind of see what we could learn. And I would say one of the biggest picture things we learned is that our students and faculty actually experienced a lot of the same frustrations, maybe through a different lens. Technology being a big one for everybody. You know, students moved home and suddenly were, doing all their work on the couch, or were surrounded by younger brothers and sisters or a grandparent. And so their whole life changed, and having stable Wi-Fi was super important. But the same thing happened for our faculty and as they moved back. And so we saw that getting comfortable with faculty, with technology was important, and making sure they had stable technology. What we saw, though, by the end of the semester is confidence for both of these groups doubled. So over 66% for faculty said they felt comfortable with technology by the end of the spring, and realized the spring was truncated. It was literally March to May, and 70% for our students. So that was a good thing. Course quality we saw was inconsistent. Really, those of us who work in online education know that what we did in the spring was we moved to remote learning. So it didn't necessarily reflect the best of online, that we tried to embed our core values, as I've talked about. We changed a lot of policies and practices and extended some deadlines, eliminated some timelines for students to say whether or not they were going to take a course for a grade or pass fail. And Faculty Senate was awesome at jumping in, but we did have to also think about everything we're doing in the context of the rest of campus and policies. And the number one thing that we heard from students was that they lost a sense of organization when they moved to remote learning. And this is important when we think about lessons learning, because we are trying to embed a sense of structure and create ways for students to feel that, as we've now moved into summer and now into fall, and likely also into spring. So summer, as I mentioned, what did we do for summer? We moved 439 courses online. It was our highest summer enrollment ever at University of Texas San Antonio. I'm sure all of you who are here have seen growing summer enrollments pre-COVID as we've grown our online courses, and this clearly validated that. We also had a little more time to think about things, so we offered incentives, financial incentives for our faculty. We started to embed quality matters very specifically into what we were doing, and had an opportunity for us to pay for faculty to take a quality matters course that ended with their ability to do a self-assessment of their own course and receive external feedback. It was a 2-week program, and we had about 200 faculty who went through that. Really, we never stopped training, but what we tried to do was, as we looked at our end of the year surveys, we paused, stepped back, and looked at how that could guide what we were doing in the spring. So we still used faculty champions, points of contact. We provided financial incentives to our faculty who were moving their courses online and embedding quality matters elements and rubrics in what they were doing. And we built in training for them. We also have a staff member in our digital learning area who is becoming certified and will now be a house trainer for us in quality matters at San Antonio. And we saw, in addition, if we went to the next level of comfort with technology and students' lack of organizational skills, we saw the next most important thing that students felt that they lost, and faculty, was a sense of engaging with each other. And I co-chaired our team along with the Dean of Science to take a look at what we were going to do for the fall. And we had a broad tactical team. And we saw over and over that issue around engagement with the course material and engagement with each other. And so the team that we chaired had about 60 people as a part of it, mostly faculty and staff, also support areas, many recommendations, and it has guided what we've done through the rest of summer. Number one was increasing focus on quality courses. So that's guiding us. Take advantage of the fact that this is a once-in-a-lifetime moment for our entering students. And so what we've tried to do is change the language from being apologetic or feeling badly about the way that our students are going to come into our community, and actually stepping into it and taking some pride in realizing that when will students or any of us ever experience a time of global pandemic, election, national election coming up, cultural unrest, and more people talking about all these things, and how can we build this into a freshman year experience? And so we have built a creative and innovative, I think, freshman year experience that includes curricular aspects, experiential learning, and will also provide our students a way so that they can archive their experiences in whatever way they want, through Spark, through videos, through written materials, through a mix of things. And then we'll be using Pressbooks to create the opportunity for them to actually have them stand as an open educational resource that will have the UTSA library. So many more things going on. We also knew we needed to coordinate resources more and build in a more distinctive student voice. And actually, this number has shifted. We have 814 courses we are currently moving online for fall. And yes, you're right, school started this semester, but we also know that courses are a bit of a design build. And so we are working with our faculty now as they are building and fine-tuning courses for the fall. We, again, are using Quality Matters. The freshman year experience is a fundamental piece of this. But what we also are trying to do is focus on engagement. I talked about the feedback we got. We also know that research shows students engaged in an online course, as in a face-to-face course, but especially online, are more likely to finish and continue. And so we started to pause and ask ourselves, what factors make a difference? So how do we help our faculty understand that really just being a person in an online environment and letting students understand a little bit about who you are, it's okay if they hear your dog bark, that's an important kind of factor around engagement, in addition to office hours and all the other structural things. And then we started looking at tools that make a difference for faculty-student engagement. And then how are we going to figure it out other than kind of people telling us? So I talked about sort of strategies and tools. There hasn't been a lot of analysis. And so what we are trying to do now is continue to look at what makes the difference, but to put a little bit of effort into assessing it. And as we talk about assessing and promoting engagement, as we work with faculty, I talked about showing yourself as being a person. We also, are still working with our faculty to help them think about how they assess learning rather than high stakes exams. And whether it's assignments, and then how can you be creative and how you assign what your students are doing or connecting. And so we have multiple ways that we are working on engagement and making sure that students own that they have an opportunity to feel like the work that they're doing makes a difference, which in an online environment is not necessarily the same as face-to-face. And what we've heard from our students is is they even miss faculty like writing things down on papers they used to have. And so we've looked for other ways to make sure that we can that students can know that their work is valued. So what I mentioned that we are new, celebrating our first birthday at UTSA as an Adobe Creative Campus. They were actually a year ago this time. We had staff from Adobe who were on campus sweating and talking to our students. And I'll never forget one of the Adobe team talking to me about how she had never seen students so grateful for what we were doing, aware of what Adobe was, and so engaged in how this was going to be a part of what their experience was. And so we started an Adobe Ambassadors program immediately after that. But during that time that we were looking at adopting Adobe, we worked with 20 faculty who received innovation grants, and this was in 19, to build their online courses, and among other things to include Adobe Creative Cloud as they were developing the pedagogy and the design of their courses. We had an array of areas represented, and so I've highlighted a few for you there, but they weren't graphic design and the typical areas. We spanned many disciplines, and many of these faculty who received their grants taught courses this past year. And so it's created an opportunity for us to, at least in a qualitative way, examine and to help us start to understand the impact of using Adobe Creative Cloud in an online course. And so we asked faculty to answer a set of questions, and then we also held some roundtables that I participated in and some of my team over the past few weeks. And one of the other things that we had done at UTSA in our digital learning area was to actually hire someone who is an instructional designer who's also taught on college campuses before, but who is our kind of internal Adobe expert. And so he's also now reaching out to faculty and to students to help with adoption and trying to understand impact. So what we found through conversations and some qualitative responses to questions, and then I'm going to talk to you about where we're going forward, is that it does make a significant positive difference in the course. At least faculty believe that, and students have told us that. So from the faculty perspective, they feel like, and this was not necessarily what we thought, but that using Adobe Creative Cloud made a significant difference to students' ability to do group work. And this came from all of the faculty that we talked about. And they further felt like they could see it in the way that students talked online, that it helped to build a sense of community in the online environments. But that, number one, group work was much more easily accomplished using Adobe Tools. And that they saw, and the woman who was teaching Spanish talked passionately about this. And I was hoping I could have a faculty member with me for this presentation, but it is the first week of classes, and so I was not able to do that. But she talked about how students showed so much more confidence being able to use Adobe Creative Cloud, which gave them different ways to convey ideas. And so she said what she had typically seen in her Spanish class was in the face-to-face environment and in a more standard way of teaching was a very self-conscious student trying to convey, trying to either speak Spanish or convey something. And in students' ability to be able to use Rush, to be able to build portfolios, to be able to use Spark. And she talked about each of these tools. She said it just gave them ways to think about Spanish, what they were learning more broadly, and to be more creative and less lacking in self-confidence. And so that was important to hear, and several of the other faculty also had stories about their other individual areas. One woman who teaches communications, used the Adobe Creative Cloud in her online class as a way for students to learn about community issues, and then to also take on supporting a community organization. So that San Antonio Zoo is the one that that this faculty member worked with and had done that in the past. And she said that the feedback that she got from the people at San Antonio Zoo was so positive because the material that the students put together when they worked on this project felt so much more professional, that they felt it was more impactful than it had ever been previously. And we've heard that before. I've heard that from colleagues at other institutions around the country who use the Adobe Creative Cloud tools to help students do community type of work. So we also heard from faculty, and this came actually from our architecture and history faculty, that they felt like that for creating their course content, that using the Adobe tools gave them more options and helped them think more creatively. Several conversations about the ease in switching platforms. And one thing that I've learned through conversations with students, and many of us probably know this, is that, you know, I'm old school. I still use my laptop for most of my work, but many of our students do most everything they do on their phone. Or if not everything, their phone plays a very important role in their assignments. And so being able to switch those platforms simply and easily across assignments is really important and was called out in a very specific way. I thought what was kind of exciting is that every single faculty member said that this was an energizing experience for them. I mean, they will continue to use Adobe tools, but their opportunity to learn something, the ease with which it was, they all said they thought it would be way harder than it was, but it, you know, we all know that it's pretty intuitive, and it inspired some creativity among each of our faculty in ways that they hadn't felt previously. A couple other specific things that they identified was that it supports peer review among students. And we know, and research shows this, that one of the most powerful ways that students learn is through peer review of their assignments. And so this is an important finding and one that we want to do some more digging around. And then our architecture faculty member talked about how he saw so many more of his students working together than he had expected using the tools. And we also have we have a lot that we've learned. We talked about, I asked the faculty if they felt like the students were gaining anything more in terms of digital skills, and they felt like they were. In fact, one of the faculty members talked about the fact that in his profession, our architecture faculty said that really having comfort with tools like Adobe will be the differentiator for students going out into the market. And as we talked about, what one of the faculty members mentioned, and she'd been teaching for a long time, is that the ease with which you can use these tools. She said even the least techie student can use Adobe, and she also called herself out, which felt really great for her. And we know that this is helping, and we're gonna dig on this further. And this is what I mentioned a little bit earlier: faculty to think about different ways that they assess learning. And this is what I think the move to online learning has done, is it has been able to shine a spotlight on issues that we've seen in face-to-face learning and in online learning, but that become more exacerbated or more obvious in an online environment. And the ways we assess learning is clearly one of those things. And so if we have tools that are inspiring and creating opportunities for faculty to look at different ways to assess learning, this is very significant going forward. And again, I mentioned that the confidence building piece, and that it being so significant. And I think faculty, one of the things that they mentioned is that they've realized that good online with great tools like Adobe and building engagement ultimately is equally satisfying and equally valuable as teaching in a face-to-face environment. So those were some of our key general findings. What does this actually mean going forward? We still need to compile the questions, the answers from our faculty, the written kinds of answers, because it will help inform as we go forward. We are pulling together some student roundtables. Students were kind of mixed in and out over the summer, but now that they're back, it's easier to be able to gather students from these courses to talk to them. And we're also collecting additional specific information as we move into the fall. So we have embedded surveys, 5 quick surveys that both our students and our faculty will take throughout the semester. And we just put out our first set of questions 2 days ago. And in the first day, we had over 2,500 student responses and over 80 faculty responses. So we feel like this is going to be a good way for us to be able to pulse take bigger issues, but also continue to look at Adobe and impact. And that is a couple of the questions that we ask are kind of preliminary. How many faculty are using it? That will give us good information about breadth across campus and help guide us to areas where we want to put more focus. And also for our students, how many of them have used this in a course. And we will continue to be asking, again, we will have 4 more sets of questions that we'll be asking as the semester goes on, which that will give us some richer data as we get to the end. We want to take a look at success rates for students and see if there's any kinds of comparisons that we can draw. It's early right now, and the spring was so disrupted that it's really a hard time to be able to, to look at statistically valid and reliable data. But that is a coming attraction for us. And actually, as luck would have it, at UTSA, we are taking a look at our faculty course evaluations. They haven't really been updated in decades, as happens at many schools. And we suspended them in the spring. So it creates an opportunity for us to look at what we might have our students provide for us around faculty that could help give us a broader knowledge base. And we are clearly increasing the number of courses that are using Adobe, along with other tools, to be able to develop a larger pool that we can analyze. So those are some of our basic next steps. And I'd love to I feel like I've been talking for days, but it could be 5 minutes. It's pandemic time. So I'd like to pause and see if any of you have any questions, or Todd, if that inspires anything along your way. And we can quit sharing my screen, or I can stay up, whatever works best.
Yeah, and so if that's your last slide, let's quit sharing the screen so people can see your face better. You just used the word inspiring, and maybe the most inspiring thing I heard was your and your university's extremely positive approach of not apologizing for this and taking pride in what you have and what your culture is about and what your faculty is about. You and I have talked many times about that early poll from Inside Higher Education, where the 3 top concerns of college presidents was engagement, and you talked a lot about engagement. The second highest concern was faculty development, and I am so jealous and impressed with 1,100 of 1,200 faculty participating in. And I believe that because I had the great privilege of being at one of your things, at one of your institutes for teaching and learning, which was an amazing experience. The third highest concern was access.
Yeah.
And that's something we want to talk about here, especially given the profile of your campus. There's a comment in the chat pod that from Linton that I'm going to use as a follow-up to this issue about access. But to talk a little bit about that aspect of things, about giving students access to technologies, about closing the digital divide, and about lowest common denominators for students in all different kinds of situations. What were your experiences and thoughts on access?
So
from the spring to now.
Yeah, it's a great question. And actually, it's something that I probably should have been more explicit about, because it is front and center for us. So I think, as many schools did, the CARES support that people received, we used almost all of it in either direct financial support for our students in the spring through the summer, and actually is trying to help students into the fall. And then we also have an extended laptop loaner program that we immediately, elevated and made sure that every student who needed a laptop could get one. And so we made sure that we had tools. We've got, webcams and other kinds of the other types of things that you need. Stable Wi-Fi is, I would say, probably among the very top issues that students and faculty have talked about. And so we worked as hard as we could to create opportunities to, whether it was like using, a parking garage or other, which many campuses did. What we're doing in the fall is actually having hotspots that students can check out and use to give them the ability to have Wi-Fi connection if they're not coming on campus. We have probably about 5 to 7% of our courses are face-to-face, but those are primarily more research-driven or in specific areas like music or arts or doctoral level courses. However, there will be areas of our campus that draw students together where they will be open, where students will be able to get in and use Wi-Fi. We again have laptops. We again have all the kinds of technology that we can think of that students need available. And so we beefed that up. I would say, the accessibility piece, the other piece of that is growing so much online showed a huge spotlight on the need for growing captioning and other kinds of tools to meet the accommodations of our students who need accommodations. And so we have an awesome woman who we hired kind of in the nick of time, who had worked in this area, but we're now using students to help expand bandwidth and helping faculty be able to caption. Panopto creates about a 70 to 80% accuracy rate, but that actually has not been an insignificant issue for us when we think about access broadly writ. And then I would say wraparound services have significantly improved since then. Everybody moved quickly. So much of the advising became remote, but it became through email exchanges, some physical, tutoring kind of the same way. So we've had this period of time to experiment with outsourcing some of our tutoring, and we're expanding that. We had a really good experience with that while we've grown some internal capacity so that our student support services feel more personal. And I would say two of our very best friends in our division is student body president and chair of the faculty senate. And so we keep them, keep regular connection with them, involved in everything we do. Met with our dean of students to talk about, our culturally diverse, but also financially needy students across the board, to just try to have more of an intent about that. And then regular surveying should give us an idea of if we've got a hotspot quickly, we can, more rapidly try to meet those issues.
Yeah. There's a question in the chat pod from Lytton about different methods for assessing learning, and that was one of your sort of later bullets. And I know that you have an extensive background in student success, and I'm interested in this idea of access beyond obviously physical or material, mechanical access, the socioeconomic and ideological access. And so I think you mentioned that specifically in terms of exams and assessment. Right. Expanding what's possible. And so kind of in response to Lytton's question, what sort of specific approaches or methods did you hear about that created sort of more access to equitable and inclusive assessment approaches across the curriculum during this transition? So
that's a great question. And I won't pretend to tell you we have that one all figured out. It's evolving, but what we did consciously, and I mentioned this, was to change some of our practices and policies. So our faculty were more flexible. We had some early communications to faculty that just simply talked about empathy and and trying to put ourselves in each other's places. So we did, and interestingly, when we would talk to our students, we got feedback from some students who felt like my faculty member got too easy, like I felt like I wasn't learning as much as I should have, but others felt could see that, and not everything was perfect, but we consciously, like all schools, have been working with our faculty to move away from those big high stakes exams that not everybody does well with, and to move to more ongoing, lower stakes kinds of exams that give students opportunities to let you know what they're learning in different ways. And it's interesting that I saw Linton's question about peer review, and what the couple faculty members who were talking about this, and one of them is a faculty member you had worked with on our campus previously, Todd, and she talked about the fact that through using Adobe Tools, students and building in an expectation around peer review, it created an easier way for students to give each other feedback, to do peer review that they didn't actually realize was peer review, but created kind of an active learning experience along the way. Does that make sense?
The good old bait and switch.
Yeah, exactly. And then when it's over,
Right.
you have experience with peer review.
Right.
And so we're continuing to work on it. The faculty chair at UTSA is a super energetic guy who, if he were here, he would say, I never taught online before. Whatever. And I'm a believer, and I know that I'm making it personal. These are the things I've learned. This is what I'm doing. But it is a continual process. But our faculty, I don't work in utopia, but I will say that most all the faculty with whom we work are really open to, oh, there's a new idea, let's try it. And actually, among the faculty kind of incentives that we're setting up this year, we decided that we wanted our 2 guideposts would be quality and to promote innovation. So we actually will have a fund set up for faculty and staff, if you're in a support role, to apply for some support if you've got an idea about how we can improve something or test something in your course or in the support that you're providing to try to promote that.
Awesome. In the question pod, there was a couple questions about Adobe Tools. And if it's all right with you, Melissa, I'm going to try to quickly share my screen and kind of illustrate and name some of this. Let's see if I got the right thing. There we go. And so are you seeing right now, Melissa,
yes.
XD on the screen?
Yes.
And so what Creative Cloud is, for those of you who maybe aren't very familiar with it, is much more than a collection of applications. We used to call it a creative suite. It really is a platform, and I call it, when used in education, a knowledge-making platform. It becomes an instrument and not just a tool. It becomes an instrument through which students can see their world and their work differently. And so an example of things that are being done in first-year writing classes are they're using an application called the Adobe XD, which stands for Experience Design, to prototype mobile apps instead of writing a proposal to solve a problem. They are using Adobe InDesign, which is desktop publishing software, to create undergraduate research journals. They're collaborating together to do this instead of your typical sort of research paper literature review. Students are using Adobe Spark for all kinds of things, including their own personal portfolios to help apply for internships and jobs. They are using Adobe Rush, which is a landmark new video editing software program, to raise awareness on issues by creating a documentary film instead of just writing a research paper. And so if we look at the verbs in each of those sentences, prototype, collaborate, publish, design, raise awareness, compose, and create, what we're thinking of here is literally a knowledge-making platform where it isn't we're learning a tool for the sake of learning a tool. We're using these increasingly and powerful and relevant technologies to deliver on fundamental learning outcomes and student success itself by making these more engaged kinds of pedagogies. So in terms of the questions that are in the question pod about what do the tools look like, that's just the quickest overview of a sort of a survey of what's possible. As you probably know, Adobe Creative Cloud is the industry standard for media production these days. And so it's amazing what faculty like the faculty at University of Texas San Antonio can do with such an incredibly powerful array of tools as a knowledge-making platform once we put these technologies in the hands of students and make it accessible to them. Melissa, you look like you wanted to add something there? No?
No, it was good. I actually was just, I made a few notes because you're right. And I love the language about knowledge making platform. And each of those words is kind of an action one. You know, what you described is what students use. What you see is actually how energizing it is for faculty. There are a lot of faculty at UTSA who've taught there for a long time. And this really creates an exciting opportunity for our faculty too.
It does.
And yeah.
So there are a couple questions about Spark and ADA accessibility. When Spark first came out, it had a number of limitations. They've been whittled down to just one, excuse me, which, as I understand it, is the alt image tag. And we will paste a link in the chat pod to talk about accessibility in Adobe in just a second. Melissa,
Todd.
also concerning, yes, concerning some of these things.
Did you want some Red Bull?
Here we go. I'm not even near the fire. So, by the way, Laura was from Houston, posted those questions, and we hope you will be safe. I grew up on the Gulf Coast, the other side of it in Tampa, so we're all concerned about everyone there being safe and surviving these storms. And so it's almost a cliche now that you don't want to waste a good crisis, and we certainly don't want to compare that kind of crisis to what we were just talking about in terms of weather and hurricanes and fires. But there is a sense that this has forever changed the landscape, that we're not going back to the traditional kinds of approaches anytime soon, and that in some ways we can't help but by analogy say, okay, well, we're going to try to do online what we did well in person. But on the other hand, it's different, and we should focus on managing the affordances and limitations of those differences and kind of embrace them. One of the things, an example of this is that when things are delivered online, there's a lot more opportunity to do things asynchronously, which can create access for a lot of people. So, excuse me, that seems to be kind of the ethos of doing this work. And I wondered if you had any thoughts so I can swallow some more.
Yeah, no, grab something. I'm worried for you. Todd, you raised actually an interesting piece about asynchronous versus synchronous. And as we moved from spring to summer, the biggest thing we heard is that a lot of what students were receiving was not asynchronous. So we worked with faculty and put more focus on asynchronous. Like everything else in the world, it's not a hard-edged one or the other. And so what we found is that asynchronous online creates opportunities for students to be able to get the same information anytime. And so you don't have to be at a set moment. And yet, what somehow got missed was that those one-on-one connections or one synchronous activity with everybody else in the class or office hours or other things that happen in a synchronous way are important to helping students connect with the faculty member, feel like they know that person, and also to engage with others in the class. So what we try to work with our faculty to do is make sure that the guts of the course is asynchronous, and yet that there is some focus on some opportunities to do some things together, because I think that creates actually the best experience. And yeah.
Awesome.
Thanks.
All right. And so I'm going to paste those accessibility links in the chat pod. I already put one there. There's a question from Laura that says Adobe Creative Cloud was free for all students in the spring. Will that be extended? No, I'm sorry, that is not going to be extended. That was an emergency response to not having any other option in late spring. And so we've been working throughout the summer very diligently to try to get every campus the right combination of things that it needs. And so that offer, that special licensing that they gave Creative Cloud to all students it basically expired in the middle of summer on July 1st. It was meant to get everyone through the spring term. And then some people actually kept using it throughout summer school. But then there have been a lot of campuses who have done what your campus has done and what my campus has done, UNC Chapel Hill, which is started providing Creative Cloud as a result of that experience to either the entire student population or significant numbers of them. Hello from India. That's amazing.
Wow. Hi.
You win the
What
award.
time? You do. Thank you.
So we just have a couple minutes left.
Okay.
What's the feeling now? What's the sort of vibe on your campus heading into this fall? I have to say that it should be no surprise that the vibe on my campus was pretty conflicted and confused. We went out of the gate too soon, and that did not work well. And so it feels pretty uncoordinated. And I'm hoping and wondering if schools that maybe have started a little bit later or having a better experience so far. What's the feeling right now, Melissa?
I think across higher ed and at San Antonio, I think faculty are a little bit tired. I mean, I think that faculty coming in this fall are excited, but there is a level of just, things have started to wear a little bit more. So I would talk to our team a lot. I talk to faculty, you got to give each other a little bit of grace. We did decide relatively early that online would be our primary modality. We offer flexibility, high flex. We, have a lot of variations in that, but at the end of the day, that would be our primary modality. We did some town halls where we had literally over 1,000 participants who listened. We were doing these in April and May and June. And at the end of the day, what we saw is that when we finally kind of said, this is exactly what we're doing, and we did it in enough time to put focus to it, it didn't really degrade our enrollment. We, heard from a few family members, but nothing significant. People just kind of wanted to know, and having a message that is focused around realizing that our top priority has got to be around health right now and quality. And we can't do both if we don't make a commitment to do what we're going to do in enough time to put focus to it. I think it's made a difference. And I think we've now we have a set of courses that we're developing in the fall, we're implementing in the fall, and then another set in the spring, where they're going to be super showcase, really interesting online courses that will really reach for the stars in terms of faculty and student experience. We worked in an interdisciplinary way, so we've got a course that will start with history, researching music and operas, move to music, where students will write something, and then move into art and architecture, where somebody will design a place where you might do this and do it all virtually and present it virtually. And so we're now looking for how do we pull out the creativity that we know is there and use this time to really enliven it. And that's what I hope stays with us moving forward. I hope two things happen. I hope the sense of creativity and innovation sticks. I think that we will have moved past that fear of technology, and online is like a dark cloud. It's not. And then the third thing I hope is that higher ed has learned, at least some of us, to move a little more quickly, and that terrible things don't happen when you make fast decisions.
Awesome. And so you've heard me talk for a long time about digital literacy. I've been using the word digital agility increasingly over the last 6 months. And I've been thinking about that specifically in terms of our students. At first my natural instinct was to apologize to them. But then I thought, well, who's better prepared for the new workplace than students who have to operate this way?
No, you're right, Todd. And actually, that's like the perfect, tie into probably my last comment. But as we were meeting, I met with a lot of student groups through the end of the semester. And the last group I met with is our student services fee group, and they actually help support Adobe for all students. And I asked them all about their semester, and one student said she felt like that this semester did more to prepare her for the workplace of the future than any other course she's ever taken, because she knows it'll probably be more remote than not. You have to be able to move quickly, and those were her exact words. And so you're right, Todd.
Yeah. Thank you so much for the inspiration today. The workplace of the future is based upon analytics. There is one more poll at the bottom. Melissa Arnold, take us away.
Thank you so much, Todd. And Melissa, that was wonderful. Great
Thank you.
presentation. Awesome discussion. As Todd has mentioned, I did just add another poll. So if you just click on the poll button at the bottom of your screen, there is one more poll for you. If you haven't answered the others, please go ahead and answer that. We would absolutely appreciate that. So again, thank you for everyone for coming today, first of all. I know everyone is busy, like Melissa was saying, a lot of places have the first week of school, so it's pretty crazy right now. And Melissa and Todd, thank you guys for taking time out of your day to,
All right.
come do this.
Hey, thank you.
Thanks everyone out there. Be
It's been
safe.
great working with you. Always good to see you, Todd. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Great. Everyone have a wonderful rest of your week and stay safe out there. We'll see you next time.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye everyone.
Bye.